Winter in the medieval world was not a season of comfort. It was a season of endurance. As daylight faded and the cold settled in, survival depended on preparation, routine, and community. Tonight, we'll step back into a medieval winter to understand how ordinary people endured months of cold, hunger, darkness, and fear, and how they survived until spring. Long before the first snow fell, winter had already begun. It arrived quietly, not with storms or ice, but with shorter days. Mornings stayed dark longer, evenings where the sun slipped away too early, leaving behind a thin, cold light that no longer warmed the earth. For medieval people, winter was not a surprise. It was not sudden, but it was always feared. They watched for it in the sky, in the fields, and in the animals. They felt it in the air weeks before it truly arrived. And once it came, there was no escaping it. Winter was not something to be endured for days or weeks. It was something that lasted for months. And during those months, survival depended almost entirely on what had been done beforehand. By late autumn, the land was already emptying. The harvest was finished. Fields that had once been busy with labor now stood bare and silent. What grew naturally would no longer grow again until spring. From this point onward, nothing new would come from the earth. Every meal eaten during winter had been grown, gathered, slaughtered, or preserved earlier in the year. There were no second chances, no late harvests, no quick solutions if supplies ran low. For a medieval household, winter was not about comfort. It was about calculation. How much grain had been stored, how much meat had been salted or dried, how long the firewood would last, how many mouths there were to feed. Each of these questions carried weight, and each had consequences. As the days shortened, work intensified, not because people wished to work harder, but because time was running out. Grain was threshed and stored in barns. Vegetables were pulled from the ground and placed in pits or cellars. Meat was preserved with salt, smoke, or air. Even animals sensed the shift. Livestock that could not be fed through winter were slaughtered before the cold set in. Better to preserve the meat than to watch an animal starve. This was not cruelty. It was necessity. Winter demanded difficult decisions, and sentiment rarely had a place. As autumn faded, villages changed in tone. There was less movement, less noise, less daylight to waste. People rose later, not from laziness, but because darkness ruled the mornings. They worked until the light failed and gathered indoors earlier than they would have in summer. Candles were lit. Fires were kept low to conserve fuel. Every flame burned something precious. Light itself became a resource. The approach of winter was also psychological. It carried memory. Everyone had known someone who had not survived a winter. An elderly relative, a child weakened by hunger, a neighbor taken by illness when the cold set in. Winter was when sickness thrived, when bodies weakened, when small problems became fatal. And so, as winter approached, anxiety crept in quietly. Would the food last? Would the firewood be enough? Would the roof hold against snow and rain? There was no modern insulation, no central heating, no emergency services. A poorly sealed roof could mean death. A damp floor could mean illness. A failed harvest could mean starvation months later. For peasants especially, there was no margin for error. The wealthy fared better, but even they were not immune. Castles were vast and stone cold. Drafts slipped through walls and corridors. Fireplaces warmed only small areas. Winter did not discriminate. It only punished the unprepared more harshly. By the time the first frost appeared, most preparations were already finished. There was nothing left to do but wait. Frost itself was a warning. It told farmers the ground had hardened, that nothing more could be planted, that the growing season was over. Animals' breath steamed in the mornings. Puddles froze thin and brittle. Footsteps sounded sharper against the earth. Winter was no longer theoretical. Inside homes, life began to contract inward. Tools were stored away. Outdoor labor slowed to the bare minimum. Families spent more time together, often crowded into a single room. This closeness was practical. Bodies shared warmth. Heat from the hearth reached more people at once. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. Winter reshaped daily rhythms. Meals became simpler. Routines became repetitive. And repetition in winter was not boredom. It was stability. To eat the same food each day meant there was food. To follow the same routine meant things had not yet gone wrong. Bread became the foundation of most meals. Dark, coarse, heavy bread made from rye or barley. Wheat bread, when available, was reserved for the wealthy. Alongside it came pottage, a thick stew of grains, vegetables, and whatever else could be spared. The contents changed, but the form stayed the same. Pottage could stretch a little food into many meals. It could be reheated endlessly. It kept bellies full enough to work. Ale was consumed daily, not for pleasure, but for safety. Water was often unsafe, especially in winter when contamination spread easily. Ale, brewed and boiled, was more reliable. Children drank it. Workers drank it. Even the sick drank it. Winter was not a time of indulgence. It was a time of conservation. Firewood was counted carefully. A fire left burning unattended was wasteful. A fire allowed to die completely was dangerous. Homes were cold, even with the hearth lit. Smoke lingered in the air. Eyes watered, lungs ached. But smoke also preserved the roof timbers and kept pests away. Discomfort was tolerated because alternatives did not exist. As winter deepened, movement slowed further. Travel became rare. Roads turned to mud or ice. Rivers swelled or froze unpredictably. Isolation increased. A village in winter was largely cut off from the world beyond it. News traveled slowly, if at all. Help was not coming. This isolation strengthened community bonds, but it also trapped problems within them. If food ran low, everyone felt it. If illness spread, there was nowhere to escape. Winter nights were long, extraordinarily long. With no artificial light beyond flame, darkness dominated life. People slept longer, not because they were tired, but because there was little else to do. Storytelling became more common, prayer more frequent, superstition more powerful. Winter was when the unseen felt closer. Strange noises outside carried weight. The wind howling through trees sounded alive. Shadows flickered against walls and ceilings. Fear was not irrational. It was learned. Wolves came closer to villages in winter. So did desperation. The poorest begged more often. The hungry stole when they had to. The cold drove people to risks they would not take in summer. Law enforcement was weak. Order was fragile. And yet life continued. Children still played indoors. Crafts were worked by firelight. Clothes were mended again and again. Winter demanded patience. It rewarded discipline. Every day survived was a small victory. Every meal eaten meant tomorrow was still possible. Spring was not hoped for casually. It was waited for desperately. By the depth of winter, people no longer counted days. They counted stores, grain bins, salt barrels, wood piles. These were the true calendars of winter. And as long as they held, life endured. Winter was not romantic. It was not beautiful. It was not kind, but it was known. Medieval people understood winter intimately. They respected it. They feared it. And year after year, they prepared for it as best they could. Because once winter arrived fully, there was no fighting it, only enduring it. In winter, a medieval home was never truly warm. Even with a fire burning, cold lingered everywhere. It settled into the walls. It crept across the floor. It pressed against skin and bone without ever fully retreating. Warmth was local and temporary. Cold was constant. Most homes were built for speed and necessity, not insulation. Walls were made of timber, wattle, and daub, or rough stone. Cracks formed easily. Wind slipped through unseen gaps. Roofs were thatched, heavy with straw or reed. While they shed rain reasonably well, they offered little protection from cold air. Snow weighed them down. Moisture seeped in slowly. Dampness was everywhere. Floors were usually bare earth. In winter, they became cold, hard, and often muddy. Straw was spread across them for warmth and cleanliness, but it quickly became dirty and compressed. Feet were rarely warm. The hearth was the heart of the home. It provided light, heat, and the means to cook food. Without it, winter was impossible. But even the hearth had limits. Fires were kept small whenever possible. Fuel was precious. Every log burned had taken time and labor to gather. Firewood was cut months earlier and stacked carefully to dry. Wet wood smoked badly and gave little heat. A household that mismanaged its fuel risked running out before winter ended. This was not an abstract fear. It happened often. When wood ran low, people burned whatever they could find. Fence posts, old furniture, even dried animal dung. Anything that could burn became valuable. Fireplaces were simple. Many homes had no chimney at all. Smoke rose from the fire and escaped through a hole in the roof, or simply drifted out through doors and cracks. The result was a room filled with smoke. Eyes stung, lungs burned, soot-coated walls and ceilings. But smoke also kept insects away and helped preserve the thatch. Once again, discomfort was accepted because it served a purpose. The fire warmed only a small area. If you stood too far away, you felt nothing. If you stood too close, your skin burned. There was no even heat. People arranged their lives around the hearth. Sleeping spaces were close to it. Work was done near it. Meals were eaten beside it. In winter, the home shrank. Rooms that were used in summer were abandoned. Upper floors were colder and harder to heat. Families crowded into one main room, sharing warmth and space. This closeness was not optional. It was survival. At night, everyone slept together. Parents, children, relatives, sometimes even animals. Not for comfort, but for heat. Beds were simple frames filled with straw, hay, or leaves. Mattresses were rare and thin. Blankets were heavy, but few. Wool was the most valuable fabric in winter. It retained warmth, even when damp. Those who owned wool garments wore them constantly. Clothing was layered, tunics over tunics, cloaks worn indoors, hoods pulled tight around the face. Fur-lined clothing existed, but it was expensive, reserved for the wealthy or for specific outdoor work. For most people, winter clothing was worn until it fell apart. Clothes were not washed often in winter. Water was cold. Drying was difficult. Damp fabric meant illness, so garments accumulated dirt and smoke. But they also trapped warmth. Cleanliness was secondary to survival. Hands suffered greatly. Gloves were uncommon. Fingers cracked and split from cold and labor. Simple tasks became painful. Children learned early to endure it. Complaints did not change reality. Windows offered little relief. Most homes had none at all. Those that did use shutters or thin animal skins to cover openings. Glass was rare and expensive. In winter, shutters were kept closed most of the time. Light entered weakly. Cold was kept out as best as possible. Darkness dominated indoor life. Candles were made of tallow, rendered animal fat. They smelled unpleasant and smoked heavily. Wax candles burned cleaner, but were costly. Light was rationed. Candles were not burned casually. They were lit only when necessary. Long winter evenings were spent in dim, flickering light. Shadows danced on walls. Faces half illuminated, half lost to darkness. This atmosphere shaped winter thinking. Quiet, introspective, cautious. Noise was subdued. energy conserved. Even movement was deliberate. To move unnecessarily was to waste warmth. People sat close to the fire, wrapped in cloaks, hands extended toward the flame. They turned slowly to warm each side in turn. Sleep came earlier, not because people were rested, but because darkness left few alternatives. Night brought its own challenges. As fires died down, cold returned quickly. Breath fogged the air. Frost sometimes formed indoors. People slept fully clothed. Hats were worn in bed, cloaks doubled as blankets. The poorest suffered most. Those without secure housing endured winter in sheds, barns, or shared spaces. Illness spread easily. Cold weakened bodies already strained by hunger. Even small injuries became dangerous. A cut that would heal in summer could become infected in winter. A cough could become fatal. Children and the elderly were especially vulnerable. Yet despite all this, medieval people adapted. They learned where heat gathered. They knew how to seal cracks with cloth or mud. They understood how to bank a fire so it'd last through the night. Knowledge passed quietly from generation to generation. Winter homes were not comfortable, but they were functional. Warmth was fragile, but it existed, held together by discipline, routine, and shared effort. Every night survived indoors was a small success. Every morning that began with a live ember was a relief. Cold was never defeated. It was managed, endured. And as winter deepened, people settled into this rhythm. A slow, careful dance with cold that would last until spring returned. In winter, hunger was never far away. It did not always arrive suddenly. It did not always announce itself with pain. More often, it settled in quietly, a constant awareness, a background presence that shaped every decision. Winter food was not about enjoyment. It was about endurance. By the time the cold truly set in, most households already knew how well they would eat. The harvest had decided that months earlier. If the grain stores were full, winter would be difficult but survivable. If they were not, every meal became a calculation. Food was measured carefully. Portions were smaller. Waste was unthinkable. Nothing edible was thrown away. Bread formed the foundation of the winter diet. Dark bread, heavy and dense, made from rye, barley, or mixed grains. It was coarse, sometimes sour, and often gritty, but it filled the stomach. Bread was baked in large batches, not daily. Fuel was too precious for frequent baking. Once baked, loaves were stored and eaten slowly. As bread aged, it hardened. Stale bread was not discarded. It was soaked, reheated, or crumbled into stews. Alongside bread came pottage. Pottage was not a specific recipe. It was a method. A thick mixture simmered slowly over the hearth, made from whatever could be spared. Grains, vegetables, herbs, sometimes meat or fat. In winter, pottage grew simpler. Fresh vegetables were rare. What remained came from storage: dried peas, onions, leeks, turnips. Root vegetables that could survive months underground. Meat, when present, was preserved. Salted, smoked, or dried earlier in the year. Fresh meat was uncommon. Animals were expensive to feed through winter. Most had already been slaughtered. Salted meat was tough and heavily flavored. It required long cooking to soften. Pottage provided the perfect solution. A small amount of meat could flavor a large pot. The same pot could last days. Ale was consumed daily, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Water sources were unreliable in winter, frozen, stagnant, or contaminated. Ale, brewed and boiled, was safer. It provided calories as well as hydration. Even children drank it, though weaker versions were common. Meals were repetitive, intentionally so. Variety was not valued. Consistency was. To eat the same meal each day meant the system was working. Change often meant something had gone wrong. Hunger was measured not by emptiness, but by anxiety. Would the stores last until spring? Would there be enough grain left by February? Would illness reduce the workforce needed to prepare food? These questions lingered constantly. As winter deepened, food quality declined. Bread grew harder. Vegetables shrank and softened. Salted meat became rarer. Fat was especially precious. It added calories and warmth. Rendered animal fat was saved carefully and used sparingly. Without enough fat, winter meals left people cold and weak. The poorest suffered first. Those without land or reliable income depended on charity, begging, or labor. In winter, opportunities vanished. Work slowed. Markets became quiet. Travel became difficult. Begging increased, so did tension. Communities helped when they could, but resources were limited. A household that gave too much risked its own survival. Hunger sharpened social boundaries. Those with full stores were resented. Those without were pitied, then feared. Stealing increased in winter. Food theft was common and harshly punished. But punishment did not always deter desperation. Children felt hunger differently. They grew thin. They tired easily. Winter stunted growth. Illness took advantage of weakened bodies. For adults, hunger became a discipline. They learned to ignore it, to push through work despite it, to sleep through it when possible. Hunger was not dramatic. It was persistent. And worse than hunger was the fear of running out entirely. Famine was not unknown. Bad harvests followed by harsh winters could devastate entire regions. People remembered such winters vividly. They passed stories down. These memories shaped behavior long after conditions improved. Food rituals developed around scarcity. Meals were eaten together. Everyone received their portion at the same time. This reinforced fairness and prevented resentment. No one ate alone unless they were sick. Cooking was slow and deliberate. Pots were watched carefully. Nothing was rushed. Fuel conservation dictated food preparation. Long simmering stews used less wood than repeated cooking. The hearth rarely went cold during the day, but it was carefully managed. Nighttime was different. Most cooking stopped. Leftovers were saved. Cold meals were accepted. Warmth and food were linked. Eating warmed the body. Warm food mattered more than flavor. As winter dragged on, morale suffered. Food scarcity affected mood, patience, and cooperation. Arguments flared more easily. Tempers shortened. But routine held communities together. Daily meals, even small ones, provided structure. They marked time. They reassured people that life continued. Spring was always distant. People did not count weeks or days. They counted meals remaining. A barrel half empty meant winter was half over, or half failed. Hope returned slowly, not with warmth, but with lengthening days. More light meant less candle use. Less candle use meant more resources saved. Every small sign mattered. Until then, winter food was not about satisfaction. It was about survival. Bread, pottage, ale. Again and again. Enough to live. Never enough to forget hunger entirely. And as long as the pot still simmered, winter had not yet won. Winter brought more than cold and hunger. It brought darkness. Not just the absence of light, but the kind of darkness that reshaped thought. That stretched nights until they felt endless. That made the world smaller, quieter, and more uncertain. In winter, darkness ruled daily life. The sun rose late and set early. Hours of usable daylight shrank until even basic tasks felt rushed. Work that required light was compressed into short windows. Everything else waited. Once the sun slipped below the horizon, homes closed in on themselves. Shutters were fastened. Doors barred. Candles were lit sparingly. Night was not a time of freedom. It was a time of vulnerability. Outside, the world felt dangerous. Roads disappeared into shadow. Familiar landmarks vanished. Travel after dark was avoided whenever possible. To be caught outdoors at night in winter was to invite trouble. Inside, darkness changed behavior. People spoke more quietly. They moved more slowly. They conserved energy. Long winter nights encouraged sleep, but not always rest. Cold interrupted it. Hunger disturbed it. Fear lingered beneath it. Illness thrived in winter. Crowded homes, poor ventilation, and weakened bodies created perfect conditions for disease. Coughs spread easily. Fevers burned unchecked. There was little understanding of infection. No antibiotics. No effective treatment beyond rest, warmth, and prayer. What could not be cured had to be endured. Respiratory illnesses were especially deadly. Cold air irritated lungs already filled with smoke. Persistent coughs became common. A simple cold could turn into pneumonia. For the young and the elderly, this often meant death. Winter illnesses were feared not because they were mysterious, but because they were familiar. Everyone had seen them before. Everyone knew their signs. Weakness, fever, labored breathing. Once these appeared, hope diminished. Medical care was limited. Local healers used herbs, poultices, and bloodletting. Some treatments helped. Many did nothing. Doctors, where they existed, were expensive and rare. Most people relied on family care. The sick were kept close to the fire, given what food could be spared, watched carefully. But isolation was impossible. Illness spread through households quickly. One cough became many. Fear followed, not panic, but quiet dread. People noticed who was coughing, who looked pale, who failed to rise in the morning. Winter sharpened awareness of mortality. Death was not hidden. It occurred at home, among family. Bodies were prepared indoors. Funerals were simple. Graves were dug in frozen ground when possible. In harsh winters, burial was delayed. The dead waited. This reality shaped belief. Winter was when superstition flourished. Long nights and limited explanation encouraged imagination. Strange sounds carried weight. Wind through trees sounded like voices. Animals moving outside felt threatening. The boundary between the natural and the supernatural blurred. People told stories by firelight, of spirits, of demons, of divine punishment. Winter was associated with trials, with testing, with judgment. Church attendance often increased during winter. Prayer offered structure and reassurance. Illness and misfortune were seen as signs, sometimes of sin, sometimes of fate. Faith filled the gaps left by uncertainty. Candles burned in churches as they did in homes. Flickering light cast long shadows across stone walls. The atmosphere reinforced belief. Darkness made the unseen feel closer. Dreams grew vivid. Sleep was fragmented. Nightmares were common. Cold, hunger, and smoke influenced the mind. People woke suddenly, hearts racing, unsure why. These experiences were often interpreted spiritually. Winter did not just attack the body. It wore down the mind. Isolation deepened. With travel limited, people saw fewer faces. News slowed to a trickle. A bad rumor lingered longer. Fear had time to grow. Wolves approached villages more closely in winter, driven by hunger. Their howls carried far in the cold air. They were heard at night. This was not metaphorical fear. Wolves attacked livestock. Occasionally, people. The presence of predators reinforced the sense of threat. Firelight was protection. Darkness was danger. Children were warned not to wander. Doors were secured carefully. Communities tightened inward. Strangers were viewed with suspicion. Resources were scarce. Winter was not welcoming. Yet amid fear, routines persisted. Daily prayer, shared meals, familiar tasks. Routine anchored people. It reminded them that life continued despite uncertainty. Illness did not strike everyone. Fear did not consume everyone. Many survived winter year after year. But survival required vigilance. a watchful eye on health, a careful balance of warmth and fuel, attention to signs of weakness. Winter demanded awareness. It punished neglect quickly. Those who ignored a cough, who underestimated cold, who wasted resources, mistakes were costly. And yet, despite all this, people endured. They endured darkness. They endured illness. They endured fear. Not because they were fearless, but because there was no alternative. Winter was not an enemy to be defeated. It was a season to be outlasted. And as the darkest weeks passed, something subtle shifted. Days lengthened slightly. Light returned, almost imperceptibly. These changes mattered deeply. They offered hope, because in medieval life, hope was not abstract. It was measured in light, health, and survival. And as long as dawn still came, even briefly, winter had not yet claimed everything. In winter, no one survived alone. Even the strongest household depended on others, for labor, for food, for warmth, for reassurance. Winter stripped life down to essentials, and among those essentials was community. As the cold deepened, daily routines became more rigid, not because people enjoyed structure, but because structure preserved stability. Routine created predictability. Predictability reduced fear. Each day followed a familiar pattern. The fire was checked at dawn. Embers coaxed back to life. If not, precious fuel was used to start it again. Water was fetched carefully, breaking ice if needed. Animals were fed, simple meals prepared. These small actions anchored the day. Work did not stop entirely in winter. It changed. Outdoor labor was limited. Indoor tasks expanded. Tools were repaired, clothes mended, baskets woven, ropes twisted. These activities required patience rather than strength. They filled long hours by firelight. Hands stayed busy. Minds stayed occupied. Idleness in winter was dangerous, not physically, but mentally. Too much time to think invited worry. Routine kept people grounded. Faith played a central role in winter survival. Church bells marked time when daylight could not. Morning prayers, evening prayers, feast days. These rituals divided the season into manageable pieces. Rather than enduring one endless winter, people endured a series of days, then weeks, then holy days. Religion offered explanation where understanding failed. Illness had meaning. Hardship had purpose. Survival was framed as divine mercy. This did not erase suffering, but it made it bearable. Churches were among the warmest stone buildings available. Candles burned regularly. People gathered. Community worship provided warmth, both physical and emotional. During winter services, churches were crowded. Bodies pressed close, breath visible in the cold air. Sermons often focused on endurance, on patience, on reward after suffering. These messages resonated deeply. Winter was proof that life involved hardship. Faith promised that hardship was not meaningless. Beyond the church, community bonds tightened. Food was shared when possible. Labor exchanged. A household with extra firewood might help one without. A family with surplus grain might lend it. These exchanges were remembered. Winter generosity built obligation. Obligation ensured future survival. No one forgot who helped them through a hard winter. Communal work continued when weather allowed, clearing snow, repairing damage, caring for the sick. Illness was a community problem. When one household fell ill, others stepped in, not always out of kindness, but necessity. A dead household weakened the village. Children were cared for collectively. Elderly relatives were supported. Winter exposed weakness, but it also revealed strength. Social order became more visible. Those who contributed were valued. Those who took without giving were watched. Reputation mattered. Winter tested character as much as resources. Evening gatherings became common. People visited neighbors, sharing heat and conversation. Stories were told, songs sung quietly. These moments were not entertainment, they were morale. Storytelling passed time and knowledge. Stories of past winters, of survival, of cautionary mistakes. Children learned what winter demanded. Humor survived even here. Jokes were dark, laughter subdued, but laughter mattered. Scarcity bred tension. Arguments flared. Old grievances resurfaced. But winter also forced resolution. Unresolved conflict threatened survival. People learned to tolerate one another because they had no choice. Community was not idealized. It was practical. Faith reinforced this practicality. Sin was framed as selfishness, virtue as cooperation. Winter punished selfishness quickly. A hoarded resource might save one person briefly, but doom them later. No household could endure winter indefinitely alone. As winter wore on, rituals increased. Saints' days, midwinter celebrations, feasts when possible. These events punctuated monotony. Even small celebrations mattered. A shared meal, a slightly larger portion, a rare treat. They reminded people that winter was temporary. Time moved forward, even if slowly. Children counted feast days rather than weeks. Adults counted stores rather than dates. Faith bridged the gap. Prayer filled quiet hours. It gave voice to fear and hope. Winter nights often ended in prayer, not always formal, sometimes whispered, for warmth, for health, for survival. And as winter reached its depth, something subtle changed again. People adjusted. They learned their limits. They found rhythm. Winter was no longer new. It was familiar, still dangerous, still harsh, but manageable. Through routine, faith, and community, medieval people created a fragile balance, not comfort, not safety, but endurance. And as long as that balance held, winter could be survived. By the deepest part of winter, time felt different. Days blurred together. Weeks passed without clear markers. Life narrowed to essentials. Survival had become routine. The panic of early winter had faded. So had optimism. What remained was endurance. People no longer asked how long winter would last. They asked whether their supplies would. Grain bins were checked regularly. Wood piles inspected. Salted meat counted. These were the measures of time now. The cold was at its most severe. Frost hardened the ground. Snow lingered in shadows. Movement slowed further. People stayed indoors whenever possible. Work was minimal. Energy conserved. The body adapted, but it paid a price. Weight was lost. Strength faded. Illness lingered longer. Winter left marks that lasted into spring. Food at this stage was at its poorest. Bread was stale or molding. Vegetables soft or sprouting. Meat scarce. Fat reserves were low. Meals shrank again. Yet even now, meals continued. The pot still simmered. The fire still burned, however weakly. These small continuities mattered. They reassured people that collapse had not yet come. Social life grew quieter. Visitors were fewer. Conversations shorter. People spoke less, conserving breath and warmth. Silence became common. This silence was not empty. It was heavy. It carried exhaustion. Winter demanded patience without offering reward. Faith shifted in tone. Early winter prayers asked for protection. Late winter prayers asked for relief. People watched the sky more closely now. They noticed subtle changes. The sun lingered a little longer in the evening. Light returned slowly, almost imperceptibly. These changes were small, but deeply meaningful. They were proof that winter was not endless. Even before warmth returned, light did. This mattered more than temperature. More light meant longer workdays. More light meant less candle use. More light meant hope. Animals sensed it too. Livestock grew restless. Birds returned gradually. These signs were watched carefully. Spring was not declared. It was anticipated. People spoke of it quietly. Too much hope was dangerous. A late frost could destroy early growth. A final storm could exhaust remaining stores. Winter punished premature optimism. So hope was cautious. As winter loosened its grip, work resumed slowly. Tools were taken out again. Fields inspected. Damage was assessed. Winter always left scars. Roofs collapsed under snow. Animals died. People were lost. Survival did not mean escape from loss. Spring did not erase winter's impact. It revealed it. Communities counted who remained. Grief was acknowledged, but life continued. Survival carried obligation. Those who lived had work to do. Fields needed preparing. Seeds planted. Spring labor was heavy, especially on bodies weakened by winter. Yet spring was welcomed regardless. It represented renewal. Food would grow again. Warmth would return. The cycle continued. Medieval people understood this cycle intimately. Winter was not an anomaly. It was part of life. Every year, preparation began again. Lessons learned were remembered. A household that survived a harsh winter adjusted for the next. More grain stored. More wood gathered. Memory was survival. Winter shaped medieval society deeply. It enforced cooperation. It rewarded foresight. It punished waste. Comfort was rare. Resilience was common. People did not romanticize winter. They respected it. To survive winter was an achievement. One earned slowly, day by day. Spring was celebrated, not because it was pleasant, but because it meant survival had been achieved. When green shoots finally appeared, they represented victory. Not over nature, but alongside it. Life resumed, carrying winter's lessons forward. And as another year unfolded, medieval people knew winter would return. They did not forget, because winter was always coming. And survival depended on remembering how it had been endured before.